So if we go back 7 years to when I'm 12 years old and I see the Simpsons cardboard cutouts in the mall and I look at them and I'm like, that is the ugliest, grossest, like I'm way better than that. So I was already putting myself above the Simpsons because I was like, I'm a real artist. I don't do cartoons. Screw that. And then 7 years later, I'm an intern on the Simpsons. So I got in.
Let's go.
He is an Emmy-award winning animator and artist who started his career as an animator on the mega hit TV series, The Simpsons. He's also logged years as a conceptual artist on multi-billion-dollar, that's with a B, box office hits, including films like Avengers: Infinity War, Fast and Furious 8, and Spider-Man: Homecoming. But what my next guest is most excited about these days is teaching art to others who want to walk the same path and creating his own psychedelic art for the love of the act of creating art itself. It's a process that is opening the eyes of legions of fans to the magic that exists beyond our day-to-day lives. Alex Ruiz.
Wow.
Welcome to This Magic Life.
Good to be here. Thank you for that amazing introduction. It's wild hearing that back. I'm like, who is she talking about? I'm like, oh, yeah, right?
So your actual story of success starts with a big fail. At least it must have felt that way when you were 17 years old. You had worked for a year to get into Cal Arts when you were still in high school. You wanted to be, your dream was to be a Disney animator, and you applied and you were rejected. Your portfolio that you had worked on for a year, how did you navigate that rejection? And what did it feel like to you? Did it feel like your dream was over?
Yeah, it really did. It felt completely shattered, and I was really embarrassed because I was like one of the cool artists in school, and everyone else was getting into their college. No one else wanted to be an animator. I was the only one, but you had a lot of illustrators and, dancers and musicians, and like everyone got into their college, and they're like, you got in, right? You got in. And I'm like, no. And they're like, oh, fuck, man, it's all right. I'm like, so I was like, I was embarrassed and shattered, and I'm like, okay, well, what do I do now?
So what did you do?
What did I do? My guidance counselor told me about an animation training program, kind of like a little pop-up training program called Animaction that kind of just popped up in Santa Monica, and they were only taking 25 students, and they're like, well, you might as well go there because there's nothing else. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll just create some new artwork, make it a little bit better. I submitted, and they're like, we like your work. You can come and train with us for, a few months. So I went there. But it was just like, okay, I guess I'll go there because there was nothing else. And so I went in reluctantly and begrudgingly, and I'm like, no, I'm supposed to be at Cal Arts. I'm supposed to be at Disney. And now I got to go to this like hole in the wall place, which turned out to be a beautiful experience for me.
Do you think it's too easy, Alex, for us when we're teenagers, 20-somethings, to get pigeonholed into thinking that there is only one right place, there is only one right job, there's only one right school?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Because you get so narrow focused, and you're like, well, I'm doing this, and it's the only thing I'm going to do. And that plays a part in determination and getting you to a certain point, but being open-minded, especially as a teenager, is like, I don't know, I wasn't open-minded, but I was just like, no, I'm going here, and I have to go here, and I will go here. But then it didn't happen that way.
What did it do to your self-confidence?
yeah, so going back to being embarrassed and being like I'd let everyone down also. Like here I was drawing since I was 3 years old. So really I've been training, all the way up in, 15 years to that point, and telling everyone, oh, I'm applying to this school. And they're like, you're going to get in because you're the best artist we know. And my mom was like, you're mama's boy and you're the best artist I've ever known. And I'm like, yeah, mom. And then,
thank you.
yes. And then, I'd have to tell her like, mom, I didn't get in and here's the letter. And she was just so supportive. She's like, you're going to get somewhere, So being very encouraged by people around me, but it was just like, I let everyone down. It's an embarrassment. I was supposed to do this, and okay, now what? Now this Animaction pop-up training program that I went to for about 9 months, and I got really good because I was determined now. I'm like, I'm going to get a portfolio worthy of Disney. So.
But you didn't go to Disney next.
I didn't.
So where did you go?
Yeah. So towards the end of that training, they announced, hey, the Simpsons are taking applicants for interns. And they were like, you should submit. I'm like, can we swear on this podcast?
Yeah, you already did.
Oh, I know. So they were like, they're taking submissions for the Simpsons interns. And I was just like verbally out loud to all my friends. I'm like, fuck the Simpsons. That's not art. That is so beneath me. I'm offended that you would even like say that to me. I remember feeling that. And then the teachers there eventually heard what I said. And they're like, okay, look, it's all you got. Like, Disney's not taking anything. And frankly, you might not even be ready for Disney. It was all shit I didn't want to hear. So I reluctantly submitted to The Simpsons.
But it was a big show already at that point.
It was. So if we go back 7 years to when I'm 12 years old and I see The Simpsons cardboard cutouts in the mall, and I look at them and I'm like, that is the ugliest, grossest, like I'm way better than that. So I was already putting myself above The Simpsons because I was like, I'm a real artist. I don't do cartoons. Screw that. And then 7 years later, I'm an intern on The Simpsons. So I got in, thankfully. One of the most beautiful experiences of my life was being on that show.
Isn't that incredible? So one of the biggest challenges, one of the biggest problems for creatives, whether they are in this medium, whether they're musicians, whether they're dancers or singers or writers, is how they can express themselves in their art form without selling their soul. And especially in the beginning, when they're young. What advice do you have?
Oh, yeah, going back to my younger self, and all he wanted to do was work for Disney as an animator, and going through the hardships of getting professional jobs and, kind of selling out in certain ways. That means something different to everyone. And years later, I would hear one of my favorite artists say, you have to be able to separate the money part from the passion. I know a lot of artists that hate their professional art jobs because of the corruption of money, or the dark side of money, and the dark side of working for people that do not give a shit about the creative process. So they will steamroll you. They will give you unreasonable deadlines. So I've seen so many artists hate their jobs. So I would recommend to young artists to at least be able to mentally separate the two. You create art because you love to create art, because that's how you experience that process. You just love it. You love it. You love it. And then think about, okay, if I'm going to monetize this, what is the route I truly want to go? But I would also encourage young artists to have a whatever job and then come home and be excited to create your own art for a time and get really good at it and don't even think about the money. And I know that that's tough, because if I were to say that to my younger self, he would have been like, screw you, man. I want the money and I want the art gig. And sometimes it's not going to be realistic. It's a very competitive world, incredibly competitive. So I would say mentally separate it and just do the art because you love it, because that's why you do the art. It's because you love it. And think about how to make money with it later on. But we can talk about the ins and outs of how one can make money as well.
Yeah. Art. So often, Alex, I think we try to control the outcome of our lives, but in this case we're talking about careers, and we have like a stranglehold on it, and it isn't until we let go and allow the process to unfold, because that is where the magic happens. Do you feel that working at the Simpsons was a magical experience for you?
It really was. And when they told me I got in as an intern, it all shifted from there. I'm like, oh, so, okay, they see me as good enough to work on the show, which I don't feel is art, but something shifted even in that day when they announced it. I'm like, oh, I'm going to the Simpsons. And they're like, by the way, they only picked 3 portfolios out of hundreds that year. And I was like, oh my God. So I did get so much better because I was determined, and the portfolio was all figure drawing, because they want to see how you can draw the figure, because in order to make a character move, you have to know how a human moves. So it was all figures and all animals, and every day I was drawing the figure and drawing animals and drawing from life. Yeah, so it shifted right away. And then I get there, I'm 19 years old, and it's all adults, and I'm like, oh fuck, I better like pretend to at least be as mature as I can.
Isn't that incredible that we feel we have to act like an age that we aren't?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you felt you couldn't be like a 19-year-old in awe of where you were?
Yeah. But then I started to realize these are all adults, but they're all like still children, because they're sitting around drawing cartoons all day. Yeah. So it was like, okay, I can be like a kid to some degree, but it was always very serious. You had your quota, you had to finish a certain amount of scenes, you had to draw the characters right, which a lot of people are surprised. Simpsons are very difficult to draw because they're so simple, and there's rules to drawing the characters, and it takes every artist, I don't care how good you are, about a year, about a full season to get the style of the show, meaning all the work, all the drawings you've made had to be thrown out. And as mine were for an entire year. So yeah, it's wild.
So did you jump right into Krusty the Clown? Or how did you land that distinguished position?
Yeah. So again, taking about a year to get the style of the show. And then somehow I ended up really connecting with this, schizophrenic alcoholic clown, which says a lot about me. And, because Krusty is a derivative of Homer. So if you can draw Homer well, you're going to be able to draw Krusty well. And you just slap the nose and the hair and the little hair on top. And I just really resonated with this character because he's wild and wacky, but he was also just very depressed and angry, and just all the emotions and the rage and the covering up with the mask of the clown. And clowns really freak a lot of people out. I love clowns, so I love weird and twisted things also. So all of these things were in one character. So whenever I would draw him, we would just like really connect. And then after a couple years or less, they're like, okay, every show that I worked on, they would give me the Krusty scenes. They're like, Alex is the Krusty guy. So, and everyone knew it, and I was proud of it. It was just like close to my heart, and I just rocked so a lot of the scenes you see with Krusty from season 7 to 14 were my animations. Yeah.
They say actors, right? They tend to identify with their character when they're filming.
Yeah.
And often take the character home with them, right? Did you ever feel like you were taking Krusty home with you? Or was Krusty taking some of you?
He was taking some. We were both taking parts of each other, because when a lot of us animators, we would go out and we would party. Like, it was wild. And so we're at a bar, right? And people get wind, oh, there's a bunch of Simpsons animators there. And so we get free drinks in exchange for drawing. So I'm drawing Krusty, getting free drinks, food. And this went on for years. And so my Krusty drawings are now put up in bars and restaurants and given as gifts to people. And yeah, it was a beautiful experience to be associated, with that character. But it was the whole community of the Simpsons animators who we were such a close pack of, mutants, as it were, just going around terrorizing the town at lunch and in nights and on weekends. And it was amazing.
I would think, being certainly the kind of art that you're doing now, and we'll get to these magnificent drawings shortly.
Yeah.
But is more of a solo act. And I recognize that you're moving in more of a collaborative fashion now. But what you did on The Simpsons and then what you did after The Simpsons sounded more like a team sport.
Yeah.
What was that like? And for aspiring cartoonists, figure draw, whatever the case may be, what do you think the upsides are from working on a animation show or working on a film project that could be some of the upsides, like the really exciting parts, because you are part of a team?
Right. Yeah. And so, learning how to play well with others. A lot of artists are very independent, and I'm also the same way, but to be able to work with a great team, a great director, a great art director, or a great assistant director, you would have to work well with the team. Otherwise, people just don't want to work with you. And so why not have fun with it all? But also learning how to work with a director who's a tyrant.
So what does that look like? Is this an art director? Is that what that title would be, or that role?
On The Simpsons specifically?
Yes.
Yeah. So you had basically 7 shows being worked on at once in a gigantic 1-floor room, right? And 7 teams of animators and background artists. So depending on what director you're working with, some are just really cool and some are just like hard line and like, no, we're making the best piece of art in the world, and others are just having fun with it and be like, it's just a fucking cartoon, like let's just have fun with it. So it really depends on which director and the assistant director that you were kind of teamed up with, and what your crew, also the other animators and the background artists on that crew. So it was a very rambunctious kind of, it was like a giant pig pen of like artists in cubicles, right? I'll have to dig up photos of that for you, but it was a really amazing experience just to be around all these artists, because everyone's cubicle really showed their personality. Everyone's drawings were much like in this room. Everyone's drawings were up on their walls, pinned in. And it was a beautiful experience just being in that team environment.
So at what point did you, I guess, decide, or maybe something happened in your life that you were gonna explore leaving The Simpsons
Yeah.
and moving more into creative art direction?
Sure.
Is that the right way
Sure.
to describe it, on films? How did that happen?
Yeah. So there came a point when I was on the show and I was about 8.5 years in, and I was literally like, I can't stand The Simpsons anymore. Doing something 8.5 years, you're like, holy fuck. Every day I'm going in, I'm drawing Krusty or Homer or Marge or whatever. And I'm like, I can't be here anymore. Like I was supposed to be done. Like this was a stepping stone to Disney. And I'm here like almost a decade later. I'm like, what the fuck? I got to get out of here. But all I knew how to draw at that point was The Simpsons. So I heard about a job for director of illustration for Fox's merchandise department, designing Simpsons toys. And I'm like, fuck, at least it's not the show. Like it's still the show, but it's like a different modality of work. So I'm like, I'm going to apply for that because at least it'll get me out of the show. So I developed another portfolio and made a bunch of drawings of like Simpsons toys. And, you know, part of the requirements was that I was an illustrator. And when I finally had the interviews, they're like, so you're an illustrator, right? I'm like, yeah.
You weren't, though?
No. So it was like one of the fake it till you make it things. But one of the requirements was like, must have 7 years minimum experience as an animator on The Simpsons. I'm like, okay, I have that. And that's huge. So I'll learn to be an illustrator while I'm applying. And so that was a few months of like meetings and stuff. And finally I got that gig as director of illustration for Fox License and Merchandise. And it was not just Simpsons, it was every Fox property that I got to, you know, have a little hand in, but I was mainly the Simpson guy, mainly. But I was like, oh, they're also doing Planet of the Apes stuff. Oh, they're doing Avatar toys. Ooh, you know, Family Guy. I'll fucking work on anything with the Simpsons. But they're like, no, you're Simpsons #1. And if you have free time, you can play with these other things. So that's how that transition started.
And at, I think around this time, someone by the name of Android Jones came onto your radar screen.
Yeah. So right around that time, I get this director of illustration job. They give me a computer at work. They're like, do you want a computer at your desk? I'm like, yeah, because no one owned, this was 2003. And it was like, sure, I'll take a computer. And they were like, oh, there's this new tablet that just came out. You hook it up to the computer and you draw on the tablet. And it was just like, it was like learning to walk again. I'm like, it was like very uncomfortable. And I'm like, I can't do this. I'm going back to papers. And so I would just have this battle between the computer and then paper, because I could draw way faster on paper. But I was like, you know what? I want to learn this thing. And right around that time, I'm watching the behind the scenes of the Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring. And I see all these artists sitting around a table and they're drawing monsters. And I'm like, that's what I'm fucking doing next. Like, how do I get that job? What is that even called? Like a monster drawer? Like, what the fuck? They're drawing like orcs and tree ants and like soldiers. And I'm like, that's cool. I want to do that higher level up stuff. And I want to work in film. And so I do a search. And I'm like, oh, this thing's called concept art. Okay, I'm going to look into that. And then there was a website called conceptart.org. It's a community of artists all working as concept artists. This is like the rock star position for a digital artist at the time. Very competitive. And these guys were just blowing my mind. The creator of that community was Android Jones.
So it was just like a Google search.
Yeah, it was a Google search. Concept art, then conceptart.org. Oh, it's this massive community of elite artists. And I'm like, holy fuck, how do I even... And then I see his work. And if you see this piece right up here, that was his one. That's what he was producing at the time. So I'm drawing Homer Simpson and I see that. And I'm like, what the fuck? How do you even do that? And I'm like, oh, he's doing it on the computer? How does one even think about doing that, let alone like, how do I train to do that? So that started that whole learning to walk again. And yeah.
So what did you do? So you were working at Fox.
Yeah, at Fox.
And you decided, oh, I want to draw monsters. Yeah. I want to get more into concept art, something you'd never heard of before. Mm-hmm. And I want to work on films.
Yes, exactly.
So how did you make that next step?
So it really just became this fierce decision of like, okay, I'm going to stop going out. I'm going to stop partying. Every night and every weekend was going to be dedicated to learning from DVDs, and Android and his community would have these meetups a couple times a year, different parts of the world, right? I'm like, I got to get to one of these things. So a massive artist symposium where they're sitting around drawing and they're teaching. And I thought, okay, I need to get to one of these things. But this was like from 2003, it was 5 years until I ended up at one of those. So it was just me alone, learning from DVDs and learning from online tutorials and just practicing and drawing and just being really kind of shitty for a long time with my digital art until I got good enough to start posting artwork in about 2007, 8.
And what happened when you did that?
Well, the response was great. I was like, oh my God, I was terrified at first to post this new kind of art. And I started posting it and people were like, wow, this is really interesting. This is good. You're pretty good. I'm like, oh, great. I'll keep getting better and I'll post more. And it just started a snowball effect. Yeah.
So Alex, can you share more about the impact that Android's work had on you and how others can borrow inspiration from the artists that they admire without feeling like they're stealing the art?
Yeah. Great question. Because, every artist is inspired by other art, whether they realize it or not. And so when I saw his work, again, it was just like, how can I even compete? I'm just going to give up being an artist because he's so good. And his crew he was associated with was very discouraging. But at the same time, it was inspiring. At least I used that fuel to be like, okay, at least I got to give it a shot. Otherwise, I'll just regret it at the end of my life. I got to give it a shot. I want to try. I want to play in this world. I want to be this kind of elite artist. And again, drawing cartoons. What I had going for me was something called pencil mileage, meaning I was drawing every day on The Simpsons, hundreds of drawings a week, sometimes thousands a month, got carpal tunnel. Was really good at controlling the pencil. So I'm like, I'm going to transfer that into learning how to control the tablet and learning Photoshop, which is a whole other beast of a thing to get into. But again, being inspired versus one of the best things I think an artist can do is to copy a master artist and then you throw all that away.
That's what they used to do back in the Renaissance.
Yeah. Exactly. You copy.
You would become an apprentice.
Yes.
And you would copy the master.
Exactly. So it's like, here's the Mona Lisa. Go copy it. And it's going to suck. And it's going to suck again. And the 10th time you do it, it's still going to suck. And you just you keep doing that. So that's what I did with Android. I started getting hints of like, oh, he's using this type of brush in Photoshop. He's using this type of brush in Corel Painter. Cool, I'm going to start doing that. And so for a couple of years, I was doing just horrible knockoff Android Jones pieces.
You were decoding.
It was decoding, yeah.
His art, because you didn't have like a paint by number kit, right? That said, I'm using this. And I mean, when you get up close to some of this extraordinary digital art, you see the level of detail.
Yeah.
Like it's minute.
It's very minute.
So were you there with like a magnifying glass? Like,
well, yeah, on the computer screen, I was zooming in, and there were even some points where I would cut out some of his work digitally with the lasso and put it into mine and just try to mimic mimic that. And then, as I would mention earlier, I started getting encouraged to post some of that. And almost immediately, it's like, you're an Andrea Jones knockoff. You're ripping off this artist. It's not good. So
those were comments that people were making?
Yeah, like public comments on the post. Yeah.
So how did you respond to that?
I mean, I don't remember responding to those, but I remember thinking, well, what is it? Flattery is the best form of, or what's the saying?
Yeah, what is it? Imitation is the best form of flattery.
So it's like, okay, I'm imitating him. And I just always put my focus back on him and his, again, he had tutorials that an artist could buy and you could see him working, but he was this rock star of an artist and he was doing things that were blowing my mind. I'm like, how am I ever going to, but I was just determined, it was just like, I'm going to get there eventually. I'm going to get there if I do it a little bit every day. So
it was step by step.
Yeah, like learning how to walk again is how I describe that whole experience of like, it was a big fish in the Simpsons pond. I was at the top, and then now I'm in this ocean of like elite artistry, and I'm like, I am nothing in this world.
Is that something that you don't feel? How incredible you are, how much you've accomplished?
I do feel it, and then it becomes a bit overwhelming sometimes, and then I'll suppress it, and I am humble as much as I can be. I like to play with it and brag about it sometimes, but that's something I hear from a lot of friends who are like, oh, he's too humble. I'm going to hype him up. I'm like, good, you do that. Like, you all do that. I just want to create art and teach art and make it the best I can. So.
Wow. As you know firsthand, Alex, one of the biggest challenges for creatives, whether they're in this space, and by the way, thank you so much for opening up your magnificent studio to me and this Magic Life community, because the opportunity to do the interview surrounded by, enveloped in the magnificence of your work is a gift.
Thank you.
So I know as a conceptual psychedelic artist today, you've received all kinds of messages from fans about how your work has affected them, how it's made them feel, how it's inspired them. You had an IG post this week that I saw that honestly was very surprising to me. And I don't know how much you've talked about where your headspace was in 2018. And you and I talked about this before starting recording, because I would never bring up something like this without knowing that my guest is open to talking about feeling so depressed, so low.
Wow. Well, I'd say one of the main things was my self-care was just, there was no self-care and there was no self-awareness. There was just blame, and it was like, I'm fine, but y'all are just fucked up. And the y'all was essentially my girlfriend at the time, which I kind of put all of my blame onto. If only you got your act together, then our relationship would be better and my life would be better and my health would be better. It was just like, but I would kind of project that onto everyone. Looking back, I was just like, I wasn't taking responsibility for my own awareness of, like, you can't live like that. Like, blame is the one thing that'll destroy yourself and those you love. Or you have to take full responsibility of like, I'm feeling this way. I need to work on this. I need to go deep in and look at my own trauma. And so that was just non-existent. So it was just like projecting all of this out, but not getting what I really wanted, which is, peace of mind. And really comes down to peace of mind, right? If we have that, then it doesn't matter what's going on in the world. We can be an example of what a free-minded and open-hearted individual is, right? So I wasn't doing any of the work, and yet I was expecting the fruits of, the work. And so at that point, I'd cut myself off completely from everyone I was close to, including family. I mean, there would be lunches and dinners and talk. It would be small talk. Oh, what's going on with work? And they were like, you're blown away. You're working on this. You've done this. You did the Simpsons. You're like a fucking rock star conceptual artist now. Must be fucking nice. And I'm like, deep down, it was like, no, it's not nice. Like none of it was, because I wasn't caring for myself. And so that went on for years.
And when you say you weren't caring for yourself, you mean you weren't eating right,
Yep.
You weren't sleeping, you weren't...
All of it.
What else would you...
No exercise, no mindfulness practice, eating like shit, drinking alcohol, smoking a lot of weed. Just like not being mindful, just kind of being on autopilot. Like, okay, I got this job and I'm showing up every day and I'm killing at the job, right? But then I'd go home and I'd drink and get in fights with my girlfriend and, be miserable about, like, I seem to have it all, but like at the end of the day, I have nothing. It felt like, because there was no peace of mind. There was no joy. Joy was just gone. So I would create art at home. I would come home and, have a few drinks and smoke some weed and create more art. It was my escape. And I was using art as a resistance, but it was also like, it was the only thing I could hold on to. And it further drove me into separation. So it was just me and my art, but also in this dark separation. I felt this heavy fog, this black fog that was just so, I'm like, this is like not okay. And that's when I had the realization in March 2018, if I don't change things now, I will end up killing myself. Like, this is the road to suicide. I finally realized, oh, I'm on that road. I finally understood why people kill themselves and where it starts. And I was like, holy fuck, this is bad. And yet I still didn't do anything. I wasn't proactive.
So how did you pull yourself out of it, or did someone else?
Yeah. So one day I'm doom scrolling on Facebook, as I would do most days. And like, I see a video from this guy, Jesse Elder, who lives here in Austin, who's become a very good friend of mine. And he knows this story so well. And like, I saw a video of him and he was just talking about the idea of, hyper presence, just understanding presence, meaning that, in any given situation, like even the situation we're in right now, like we have no problems, even though we might have a lot of problems. Like right now, like we're safe. Like there's no fucking monsters. I mean, they're all in our head, right? But seriously, if we take the time and to be still and realize right now, I have no problems right now. So I use that as a mantra, and then that created some space for me in all of this turbulence of like, okay, I know life is fucked up and I'm depressed and I have nobody, but right now I have no problems. What else can this guy Jesse teach me? So I started kind of just following him, and he made a lot of videos and a lot of great content that he was giving away for free. And I started joining his programs, and then that started my trajectory out of that hole. And it was a long and slow process coming out of that, but he was the one that essentially reached his hand in and pulled me out of the darkness. And yeah, it's beautiful. So now, like I said, he's a very dear friend and he's a massive inspiration. He has a lot to do with all this and why I'm here in Austin also.
So that was like a serendipitous,
yes,
magical,
miraculous, yeah. Because I wasn't following him on Facebook. I don't know how. And he said, yeah, I wasn't doing ads for that. I don't know how you saw that, but I don't know how I saw that video. I don't know. So.
And now you're here in Austin.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I've been spending a lot of time with him since I've been out here. And he's my coach. He's my mentor. He's, yeah, among many other coaches. And that's the importance of coaches. And even if you feel you've reached this point, you're always going to need a coach that's higher up, that's doing the the more advanced work to help bring you up. We can always grow and grow and grow.
So how did you start to develop Alex Ruiz's voice and your style? Because I can say personally, I can remember after working at CNN for 14 years and like in a somewhat similar way to you, Alex, feeling like I was churning out news nuggets. Like I had gotten really good at producing, writing my scripts, you know, day by day. I was churning them out, but I didn't feel like I was a really good writer. And it wasn't until I moved into, believe it or not, posting on LinkedIn every day.
Wow.
That I started just every single day writing in my voice for my, I can't call it an art form, but for my audience.
Yeah.
That I began to develop what I would say is my style.
Yeah. And it was through that consistency.
I did it every day. And some days, right, you just don't feel like doing it. And you got to do it anyway. So you got to move through that uncomfortable, uninspired mindset. And then other days you're like, oh, yeah. Like, okay. All right. I feel proud of this.
Yeah. And it's because you moved through all the times you didn't feel like doing it. If we only did things when we felt like doing it, we would get nothing done. At least that's kind of what we're talking about now. You have to do things even when you don't feel like doing it.
Yeah. So when do you feel you hit like, okay, I'm not an Android Jones knockoff. I'm actually my own creative being.
Yeah. It came to this point where I get an email from this promoter, this event promoter, and he said, hey, Android Jones referred you to me. He's busy now, but he says if there's one person who can create his vibe, it's you. And that was huge. And this was 2010, 11 maybe ish. Yeah.
So what did you do? Were you like dancing around your apartment? What were you doing?
Yes, because that was that moment of like, oh, here's my hero, my mentor, now referring work to me because he's too busy, and saying if there's one person who can create the aesthetic, not the knockoff, the aesthetic, the vibe, it's Alex Ruiz. I'm like, holy fuck, wow. That was incredible. And that was, 8 years into learning this new craft and getting really good at it. So it took a lot of time, but that point was like, oh my God, I've reached this new level of artistry. And it was a huge honor.
Could you tease out what psychedelic art is? And you and I were chatting before we started interviewing, and you were opening my eyes to all the different forms of plant medicine that you can ingest to create. And you could actually look at your art and say, oh, this was influenced by such and such a plant medicine.
Yeah, so what we were speaking of are the different visual signatures of the different medicines that have different pattern relationships. And, some are very, like for instance, psilocybin mushrooms has a very symmetrical and unified aesthetic to it that is also continuously growing and moving when you're in the experience. So a big part of what I've been doing is it's part of my integration with these experiences. I want to bring back what I saw and felt in the form of visions. And that's what visionary artists do, psychedelic visionary artists. They they bring back what they've experienced in visual form. And it's a beautiful process because every different medicine, as we're talking about, has a different structure. And so, for instance, ketamine has no cohesive structure. It's almost like if you've seen the work of M.C. Escher, where you have stairs going this way and that way and that way. And it's a very discombobulated thing. So the drawings that are ketamine influenced have all of that. The drawings that are psilocybin have much more of the earthy, flowery. The experiences of LSD are much more like 80s neon downtown experience, right? So yeah, they're all beautifully different, and I like to bring those back.
And what are these? What are like this magnificent horned creature?
That's definitely, there's a bit of LSD in that, and that's a kind of a lot of my work is like Frankenstein-esque, meaning I take pieces from other pieces and bring them in to create new pieces. Every new art piece I make is a series of assets for a whole new series of artwork. So she's made up of ink drawings, digital drawings, patterns I've made from my own work, and yes, with the influence of LSD in creating that series. Yeah.
You discover Android, you discover monsters and concept art and film. How did you make the leap from 20th Century Fox to Disney? And what's so beautiful about this is that it goes back to that 17-year-old boy who thought he was going to be an animator at Disney. You got there, but you weren't an animator.
Right. Yeah. So, going back to the decision to become a concept artist for film happened 20 years ago, like now, this month, 20 years ago. I was at Fox. I see the Lord of the Rings. I'm like, okay, I see Android's work. I'm like, I want to be a concept artist for film. I want to work in movies. I want to see my name in the credits of the art department in movies. So, from that decision from 2003, it was 11 years until I started working with Disney and Marvel and all of them through Digital Domain. So I get it. If we fast forward to 2014, I get an email from the recruiters at Digital Domain, and my first initial thought was like, nah, I'm good. At that point, I didn't even want it anymore because I developed a somewhat successful independent artist life. I was going to shows and Comic-Cons and having booths and doing commissions and working on comics, and also video games. I was concept artist in video games. And that entire time, it was 11 years from that decision to be a concept artist. And they reach out and I'm like, I'm good. And so my girlfriend at the time, she was like, are you fucking crazy? Like, as long as I've known you for 5 years, you've been wanting to be a film concept artist. Here you have this like elite visual effects company that does concept art for film reaching out to you, and you're saying you don't want it. Because I'm fulfilled as an artist now. And I'm like, fuck it. She's like, just go in. It's one project. It's 6 weeks. Just go in. So she had to kind of like convince me to be, okay, I'll fucking do it. But at that point, I was over it. And so I go in, and like 2 weeks in, they're like, we need someone like you in-house. Like, we're going to offer you like full-time salary, conceptual artists. And there was only 2 concept artists there. And I was going to be one of them. So then I stayed for 5 years.
What do you think the takeaway is for our viewers and listeners, Alex, about like the stranglehold that we can have on how our dreams are supposed to unfold, and what the value is on loosening the grip?
Yeah. It's like, it's like the old spiritual saying that the more you let go, the more you get. So And that's very difficult. Now, how do you even do that on a practical level? Yeah, it means to stop having such this stranglehold, and it's like that song, Hold On Loosely, like you can hold on, but loosely, like not having the expectations. And, it's that fine balance of like, I want to do this, I'm determined to do this. And yet at the same time, whatever flows from that determination and love, it all comes back to the love of the craft. And what flows out of that is what flows out of that. And you can't control. This is what I mean about, like, you can control the line and the brush stroke, but you can't control other people's decisions in the world that may or may not go the way that you want them to. So yeah, holding on loosely, and that's a practice. That's a craft in and of itself. And that comes through mindfulness and meditation practices and things like that.
And I think it can also be learning to trust your intuition, and also appreciating that there is no one path. There is no one right path, and there is no one wrong path to getting to your happy place.
Right.
How did you reach a point? Because if we're going back to that 17-year-old who ends up getting rejected from Cal Arts and moving to that pop-up animation 9-month program, and then getting offered an internship at a very big show, which you felt was beneath you, but then saying, okay, I'm going to do it. What words of wisdom can you offer to our viewers and listeners about what that feels like? That it's, you're not selling out. You're not, like, especially in the beginning.
It's weird, because if I were to have this conversation with my 17-year-old self, which I do all the time, 17, 18, 19, you have to jump at these opportunities, even if they feel they're beneath. And you have to jump into them and honor them and have gratitude that you're even given the opportunity. So cultivating that gratitude as you go along. And that's tough, especially for young people, is to have that sense of gratitude. Just even the gratitude that you are an artist, or you feel that you are a creative person, to be grateful that you have that. Because people always ask me, like, did you always have that? And I'm like, I always had it. Like, the desire to want to create. And I feel all children have that, going back to, there's a time in most children's lives where they're told to stop being creative. And I think that is one of the biggest travesties in human experience. And this is something, going back to my love of teaching and helping people rediscover their creativity, because it's just so sad to me when I hear a story of, like, yeah, I used to draw, and then my parents said, stop, and you're going to be a doctor, because you're not going to make money as a broke ass artist. Or they're drawing, right, and another kid says, you suck, man, you'll never get anywhere. Like, those are the two biggest stories that I see stopping the creative mind. But again, having the gratitude that one even has, the desire to want to create, and you cherish that, and you're grateful for it, and you cultivate that, and that will then lead to opportunities where people say, hey, I like your work, would you like to come and work for us?
So you're at Disney.
Digital Domain, but I'm working
Digital
on
Domain,
Disney,
working on Disney films.
Yes.
Working on films like Fast and Furious, Spider-Man Homecoming. What was that like? And Beauty and the Beast.
Beauty and the Beast and Avengers Infinity War were kind of like my two climactic film experiences. Because on Beauty and the Beast, I was a part of the team and a massive part of the team of conceptualizing the beast. They're like, okay, we know what he looks like in the cartoon. Now we're doing this live action thing. We need to figure out, what does he look like in the real world? What do his costumes look like? What do the horns look like? This is where my horn obsession came in, because I had to actually figure out where the horns originated, where they twisted, and I would do, hundreds of variations to show the directors, and do you like this? Do you like this? And yeah, so that started the horns. So you might notice a lot of horns around
yes,
here.
I do.
That started from Beauty and the Beast. And I got to design environments, the castle, the wolves, all of the beast's clothing. It was a powerful experience. And then to see it up on the big screen, and then my name as conceptual artist on the screen was just like, wow, my God, powerful. Avengers Infinity War was my other big film, and where I got to design a lot of environments and characters. And there's this piece of armor that the villain Thanos wore, and it was basically a blank piece of metal. And they came to me and they're like, okay, we need a design on this thing. And they're like, go, give us some ideas. And eventually it became this thing. And it's a total joke at this point, but the design ends up looking like my initials, but upside down. And so that's the joke I tell people, is that I purposefully engraved my initials onto Thanos' chest plate, essentially making it the greatest act of vandalism in film history. So, that's not how I intended, but now when you look at it, and this piece that he wears gets so much screen time, and I see it, I'm like, holy fuck, it's like right there. Yeah, so that was great.
Final question for you, Alex. What advice would you offer the 19, 20-year-old Alex Ruiz about how to picture his creative journey and his reaching for the stars, reaching for those dreams?
I love that. And you said the word picture, visualize. This is the power of the imagination, which is the most powerful thing we humans have. And so, to kind of wrap it up, and, why I ended up resonated with Joe Dispenza, which that is a big part of his teaching, is visualizing a future event with all emotional intensity, and visualizing the smells and the sounds and what people are wearing. Let's say an artist can visualize an art show. You do this as a practice. You visualize it every night for 20 minutes. You drop into it and you feel, okay, what's the venue look like? What's the lighting? Who am I inviting? What is the art on the walls? And you visualize and visualize and visualize. And it's amazing what will start manifesting in your own life. And that is how I had my first art show, was through this process, was through Joe Dispenza. And so now we're here 3 years later, and I'm actually working with him and for him, and visualizing my next art show in March the same way, through his teachings of like visualizing the experience. We can all do that. And so that's what I would tell my younger self, is visualize your future more. What do you want? What don't you want? And make it a practice of visualization. And it's amazing what will come out of that.
And what I love so much about that, Alex, is that is how you came onto my radar screen, not through the visualization, but through the output of your visualization of working with Dr. Joe.
Yes.
And I saw you on a live stream interview that Dr. Joe did with you in January of 2023, when he was unveiling his Inspire album, and you had done the magnificent artwork for the cover album. I was so taken with you as a soul, and I am just so unbelievably grateful that the universe brought you into my field, Alex. And before I say goodbye, where can our viewers and listeners find you? We're here at Casa
De Luz.
Yes. In Austin. But how can people find you? You have a website. What else do you want to put out there?
I'm primarily mostly on Instagram these days. So alexruiz.artist.
RUIZ.
RUIZ, alexruiz.artist. I'm post there every day. I post about meetups here. I post about my journey. That is the first and foremost place. And that can lead to my website, but that's going to be the main place people can find me.
I want to thank you so much for carving out so much time in your day to share your wisdom and insights. And I want to wish you, Alex, many, many more magical moments and experiences to come.
Let's go.
Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of This Magic Life. Our mission is to inspire you to stop fearing your future and start getting excited about all the serendipitous and magical opportunities that await you. Make sure to subscribe to This Magic Life on YouTube so you don't miss any new episodes. And for on-the-go listening, give us a follow wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. We absolutely love to get feedback from the This Magic Life community, so make sure to drop us a comment on YouTube or a 5-star review on Apple. And you can always stay in touch with me on LinkedIn at Andrea Koppel, aka the Career Magic Maker. Hope to see you soon.